He crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped tightly together. Copper wire. Thin, common, real, something you could find anywhere. Not special. Don't get your hopes up, he warned himself. Iron is it, that's what you know. This was just a test. One last variable, one last confirmation. If copper did nothing, if the hollow stayed silent, cold, unchanged, then that was it. He'd stop pushing, stop wondering, stop risking things he couldn't afford to lose. He lay back and stared at the ceiling, heart pounding too fast for someone who'd supposedly made peace with his limits. Just one test, he murmured into the dark. The hollow answered with nothing at all. And somehow, that scared him more than if it had. Izuku woke to silence. Not the heavy, uncomfortable kind that came with being alone at night, but the light, open quiet of a house that had already started its day without him. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, warmer than he expected, and for a moment he just lay there, confused. Saturday. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and listened. No voices, no footsteps, no clatter from the kitchen. His chest tightened slightly as he swung his legs out of bed and padded toward the door. The hallway was empty. Downstairs, the living room was neat, the couch cushions straightened, shoes gone from their usual place. They'd left. Izuku slowed as he entered the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of coffee and toast, already fatting. A white note was stuck to the refrigerator with a red magnet. Izuku. You were asleep, so we didn't wake you. We're going shopping, and we'll be back in a few hours. There's food in the kitchen. Era. His fingers hovered over the paper before carefully peeling it off. They hadn't woken him. They'd noticed asterisk he was asleep. Izuku stood there longer than necessary, rereading the note until the words felt real. Then he folded it once and slipped it into his pocket without thinking. The house was his. That almost never happened. He moved quietly, like he might break something by existing too loudly. He poured himself cereal, then changed his mind and cracked eggs into a pan instead. The sizzle filled the kitchen, sharp and alive, grounding him. As he cooked, his thoughts drifted, unbidden, uncomfortable. He'd always assumed they tolerated him, that taking him in had been an obligation, not a choice, that every meal, every roof, every rule was something he owed them for. But lately, Ms. Eri waiting up. The fuller plate. The way she'd added copper wire to the list, without hesitation. Izuku stared down at the pan, grip tightening on the spatula. Did they always care? The question felt dangerous. Had they always noticed, always worried, always adjusted around him in quiet ways he'd never let himself see? Or had he been so used to being unwanted that he'd mistaken distance for dislike? He swallowed hard, eyes stinging unexpectedly. I'm stupid, he muttered, but there was no anger in it, just confusion, maybe regret. He carried his breakfast to the table and ate slowly, the house still and warm around him. For the first time in a long while, being alone didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like trust. Izuku glanced at the clock. A few hours. Time enough to think, time enough to plan, time enough to test carefully, quietly, without anyone watching. He rested a hand over his chest, over the hollow that had changed everything. Just one test, he whispered again. But now, the words didn't feel like giving up. They felt like a beginning. They noticed the quiet first. The front door closed with a familiar click, grocery bags rustling as they were set down by the counter. Shoes were kicked off in a messy line almost immediately as the younger kids burst ahead, laughter echoing through the house. I call the red blocks. No fair, you had them last time. Their voices faded toward the small playroom, the sound of toys already being dumped onto the floor. Ms. Eri paused in the entryway. She frowned, not in concern, not yet, but in mild confusion. The living room looked different. The blanket on the couch was folded neatly. The books on the shelf were aligned instead of slanted and uneven like usual. She stepped farther inside. Did you clean this morning? She asked, half turning toward her partner. He shook his head slowly, eyes scanning the room. No, thought you did. The kitchen drew her next. The counters were wiped clean, no faint stickiness from breakfast. The sink was empty. Even the floor looked swept. It wasn't spotless. This was still a house with kids, but it was intentional asterisk. Ms. Arai set the grocery bag down more carefully this time. Izuku, she murmured. Her partner checked the refrigerator out of habit and stopped when he saw the magnet still holding the note she'd written. He read it again, then glanced toward the stairs. His shoes are gone, he said. They exchanged a look, not alarmed but thoughtful. He must have gone for a walk, Ms. Arai said quietly, after cleaning. That made him blink. He cleaned. She nodded slowly, a strange tightness forming in her chest. The whole house, by the looks of it. They stood there for a moment longer, listening to the kids argue cheerfully over toys in the other room. The house felt warm, lived in, cared for. He didn't have to do that, he said. No, she replied. He never thinks he has to. That was the problem. Ms. Arai moved to the window and glanced outside, down the street. No sign of green hair or hunched shoulders, just sunlight and passing cars. I hope he knows, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. Knows what? That we noticed, she answered, even if we don't say anything. Her partner nodded once, jaw tightening faintly. In the playroom, a toy clattered loudly, followed by laughter. Life continued, loud and imperfect. Ms. Arai turned back toward the kitchen and began putting groceries away, hands steady but heart unexpectedly heavy. Wherever Izuku was, walking, thinking, trying to outrun his thoughts, she hoped he felt it. The care he kept trying so hard to earn had been there long before today. And it wasn't going anywhere. Izuku didn't remember deciding to go on a walk. One moment he'd been standing in the hallway, rag still in his hand, the house quiet and clean behind him, and the next he was outside, the door closing softly at his back, the afternoon air cool against his face. He walked. No destination, no plan, just movement. The neighborhood passed by in familiar fragments, cracked sidewalks, rusted fences, a cat perched on a low wall that watched him without fear. Izuku kept his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, eyes unfocused. His mind wouldn't stop. It hadn't lately. Thoughts piled on top of each other, iron and fire and copper wire, Aizawa's shadowed presence, Ms. Arai's note, the Fuller plate. The way his caretakers, voices had softened without him noticing when that happened. Emotions tangled with calculations until he couldn't tell which came first. I'm just a kid, he thought suddenly, and the realization hit harder than any villain ever had. 14. 14 years of being told he was early, then late, then never. 14 years of watching everyone else wake up to something special at 5 years old, quirks blooming like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then there was him. A late bloomer. The words felt heavy in his chest. Late bloomers were supposed to be behind, supposed to be weaker, slower, catching up forever. But his quirk, whatever the hollow really was, hadn't arrived quietly. It had arrived dangerous. Izuku's step slowed as his thoughts spiraled. If I'd gotten it earlier asterisk. If someone had noticed asterisk. If I wasn't figuring this out alone. He stopped at a crosswalk, staring at the red light without really seeing it. His hand drifted to his chest, fingers pressing lightly over the hollow as if grounding himself. It was too much. Too many ideas, too many risks, too many feelings he didn't know how to sort. Fear tangled with excitement, guilt with hope, exhaustion with something dangerously close to pride. He didn't want to be special like this. He just wanted to understand. The light changed. Izuku crossed automatically, feet carrying him forward while his mind lagged behind. Everyone else gets time, he thought bitterly. Time to grow up with their quirks. Time to make mistakes when adults are watching. He'd gotten his at 14. No manual, no safety net, no room to fail. Izuku swallowed hard and kept walking, the city humming softly around him. Somewhere ahead, copper wire waited in a shopping bag. Somewhere else, a tired hero was piecing together patterns. And here, between them, was a boy who hadn't asked to bloom late, only to survive what bloomed with him. Izuku walked on, thoughts heavy, steps steady, trying to carry it all, one breath at a time. Izuku's feet kept moving, but his thoughts slipped backward, years backward, into a place that still hurt in quiet, persistent ways. He'd always wanted to be a hero. Not the vague kind of wanting kids grew out of. Not the passing admiration that faded when things got hard. It had been constant, steady. All Might posters taped crookedly to his wall, notebooks filled with analyses no one had asked for, reruns watched until he could recite speeches by heart. All Might smiled, no matter how bad things were. All Might saved people, even when he was hurt. All Might made the impossible look right. Izuku had wanted to be like that. But wanting hadn't been enough. He'd been quirkless. He'd learned that word early, learned how it sounded like a verdict when doctors said it, learned how it looked when people pitied him, learned how it felt when classmates laughed. You should stop dreaming. You can't be a hero without a quirk. Deku like you should know his place. He'd heard it so many times it had stopped sounding cruel and started sounding reasonable. Izuku's step slowed. He'd told himself he understood, told himself it was fine to admire heroes from a distance, to support them, to analyze, to help in safer ways. He'd folded the dream smaller and smaller until it fit somewhere it wouldn't get stepped on. Until now. Now he had a quirk. And somehow, that made everything worse. Because what was he supposed to do with it? Hope rushed in where it had been forbidden for so long, clashing violently with years of being told to stop. It left him dizzy, unsure which voice to trust, the one that whispered asterisk maybe asterisk, or the chorus that had always shouted asterisk never. If he told someone, would they even believe him? He pictured it too easily. Skeptical looks, forced smiles, someone suggesting therapy or performance classes, like this was just another delusion he needed to outgrow. You're imagining things. You want it too badly. You need help. Izuku clenched his fists in his pockets. He didn't need help like that. He didn't need to be fixed. He needed someone to sit beside him and say, I see it too. Someone to help him understand, not dismiss him. Someone to stay. But there was no one. He didn't have friends he could confide in. No one he trusted enough to carry this weight with him. He'd spent so long being alone that solitude felt normal, even when it hurt. The realization pressed down on him, heavy and sharp. I just wanted to be a hero, he whispered, the words stolen away by passing cars and distant voices. Not for glory, not for praise. Just to help, to matter, to save someone the way All Might saved everyone. Izuku kept walking, eyes stinging, chest tight around the hollow that pulsed faintly beneath his ribs. He didn't know what he was allowed to believe anymore. Only that dreaming had never hurt this much before, and that he was carrying it alone. Izuku didn't realize he'd turned back. The house settled slowly. The TV was off. The lights were dimmed one by one until only the soft glow of a lamp in the living room remained. The younger kids had fallen asleep in uneven positions, one half curled on the rug, another sprawled across a beanbag in the playroom, quiet in the way only exhaustion could make them.